Welcome back to the channel. Today I have a very special guest for you who has been dominating the high roller poker scene for many years now. I'm sure you have heard the name Andy Stakes Poker before, especially if you watch high stakes poker on YouTube. Andy and I had a super valuable conversation a few days ago since he knows the importance of a strong mental game and is constantly working on it. Feel free to check out Andy's YouTube channel where he's uploading amazing content about the game he plays and many other things. You'll find all his links below the video, and now I would say let's jump right into the conversation.
The purpose of our video today is to kind of educate poker players on why mindset coaching may be important for you, why you may, how you may benefit from it. First we got to talk about a little bit about how you could benefit from coaching, and why mindset is even important in poker, right? Because a lot of people may have a misconception and think that, they just have bad luck. And, I think a lot of poker players may underestimate how important it actually is, and definitely for me, like just from experience from playing for so many years, I would say that mindset in poker is might be the most important thing. It's not, about the cards. I mean, obviously the cards are important and luck is a huge factor in the game. But at the end of the day, if you're playing, many hours and you're playing a lot of poker, how strong your mental game is really what's most important at the end, and so, yeah, in this video today, we're going to let Karim kind of share with everybody the information, some key information about, his coaching and how players may benefit from that. As we just mentioned, I obviously agree that all poker players can benefit from mental coaching in some form, but how important would you say it is these days in poker in the modern era now, 2023?
Yeah, very good question. I think if you look at sports in general, because that's something that I look at a lot, I'm not just looking into poker, I'm looking at other sports and I say, okay, what do these athletes from football or basketball or whatever deal with? And how important is the mental game for them? And I think what you see, especially in the UFC, I'm a big fan of MMA and the UFC. What I see in there is that the athletes, if you just see them on paper, right? They have nearly the same age, they have the same weight, obviously. Yeah? They know how to throw a punch, they know how to throw a kick.
Right.
But it's interesting for me to see that some athletes, they crush it completely and they end up becoming the champion and sometimes are unbeaten for years.
Oh, for sure.
And others struggle to win 2 fights in a row. So I was thinking, like, how is that possible that some athletes, even they have like the same abilities in most cases, right? They know how to throw a punch. They have the same weight, as I said. How is it possible that there's such a big gap between one athlete and the other?
Yes.
And I think it's just a mental game. So if you see this in high level sports like UFC, MMA and stuff like that, you can break it down into poker. And this is something that Ben taught me in the very beginning, because I asked Ben, how is poker not a game of luck? And he said it's very simple to explain, because if you play the lottery, you see like one person winning the lottery once in his life.
Yes.
But if you take a look at poker, you see the same people always on the top.
Right. Yes.
And this is the easiest way to explain that poker is not a game of luck. Poker is a game of skill.
Right.
So if you take a look at the highest level of poker, you also see that those people that end up being on top usually also have a very strong mental game.
Absolutely. I think it's very apparent, like in like high roller tournaments, that circuit as well. Like in that circle, those players are all very equally matched in skill. Maybe some, have more technical ability, like slightly, right? But like you said, like when athletes are so close in skill, then what is paramount? What is the separation, right? That gives an athlete an edge over a slight edge over another. It's like you said, it's the mental game, right? It's how strong are they mentally? And it's just like that, as like you said in poker, like I said in high rollers, where all those players are very well studied. They're very familiar with the game and they know every spot. They've been through all of it. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, those little details in how strong they are mentally is going to be all the difference, right, over the long term. Yeah, like so. What kind of players do you think, would benefit the most from like a mental coach? Because a lot of people, when they think about having mental coaching, in poker, they think about when they go through a downswing, right? They think like, oh, like because players are at their worst in the downswing, right? Like everybody can play well when they're like winning, but when they think about like, oh, like maybe I should hire like a coach to like help me mentally, is that the only kind of players that would benefit? Like what other kind of players, that maybe are not in a downswing, how could they benefit from it?
So usually it's not just a downswing, it's either downswing or when they tilt a lot. Yeah, this is so the classic thing when people think they need a mental coach. But I honestly think that a mental coach is good for people that really want to become the best version of themselves in and outside of poker, or who really want to strive to become a high stakes crusher. Because I honestly think that at some point it would be really beneficial to have someone on your side who really finds the leaks with you, because a lot of times you're not even aware of it, and helps you to fight them or overcome them. And sometimes small changes can make a huge difference. And I'm sure you would agree from a technical standpoint as well. Sometimes if you make the same mistake technical wise and you make small changes, sometimes it's the bet size or a little bit more check raises or whatever, that can make a huge difference to your results and to your income.
Yes.
And I think it's the same for your mental game. So even if you think everything is fine, it would be nice to just have a conversation and to see if there are certain leaks that we can find and then that we can work on.
Yeah, I think as good as a poker player as some players are these days, like no one's perfect, right? We're all human at the end of the day, and we're not robots, like players are gonna crack under certain pressures and they're gonna make mistakes and any leaks that they can plug mentally. So when they're under those circumstances, they can perform at their most optimum level is going to give them a huge edge. And I think that's the key right there. Yeah. And like, I also agree that like, I think the mind is like a muscle, right? It's like back to the analogy of like, we're talking about athletes, like the mind needs training in that sense where like you said, like whether it's like just baby steps, but when you're moving towards that direction, the right direction and improvement and plugging leaks, the mind needs to kind of train and needs to work on things like that, And it's not just like you can just make a switch. It's like you need to kind of make small improvements and little by little, like we're talking about tilt, right? Maybe you find that you start tilting less and less, or it takes longer for you for the frustration to come kind of seep in, right? Because he's been working on that mental game. So
yeah, what I want to add here as well is that it's not just about trying to fix something. Yeah, when people say like, oh, that is something I need to fix, but it's also about improving, or can be only about improving. Even if you say I'm not tilting or I'm not in a downswing, if you want to get better, having someone who can guide you along the way is always a good choice, I think.
For sure. Okay, now let's talk about like what are some of the most major problems that you see some poker players have these days. We talked about tilt already. What are some other major ones that you think you'd be able to help poker players with?
One of the I mean there are a few, but I tell you something I saw very recently a lot. So one of the major things that I see is that people a lot of times have a huge potential, but sometimes they stand in their own way. It could be in form of self-sabotage or just laziness or a lack of self-discipline. And I can tell you many stories of people where I instantly see that they could become one of the best poker players in the world from their potential.
Okay.
But then sometimes they're like, oh, I don't know, man. I'm making good amount of money. Why should I even push more, right? And then they're like, like lazy, right? And I'm always there to like, come on, yeah, there's so much potential, yeah, push yourself, yeah. And I think it's completely understandable. Yeah, there's some guys that are coached. They're at the beginning of the 20s and they're really close to becoming a millionaire. So of course, if you think that through, right? He's not even like in his mid-20s and he has probably more money than his parents or like anyone he knows.
Right.
So it's completely understandable, but really like unlocking your full potential and pushing yourself to the absolute maximum and seeing where you can go. Yeah. Like that is for me one of the most beautiful things in my job. So that would be one. And the second one, I think the classical stuff, when people have troubles controlling their emotions, or one thing as well, something that is extremely underrated is performance improvement.
Okay.
So one thing that I teach my clients a lot is we talk a lot about sports psychology. And I always take a look at different studies and I teach them what works. So one of the first things that I like to teach my clients is how to install emotional triggers. So what I mean with that is just imagine a door in front of you and you can open the door, and behind the door is your best self with basically your highest performance. And you can enter that state whenever you want to open the door. And after the session, you can basically close the door and you sleep like a baby. And this is one of the things that I like to teach my clients in terms of emotional triggers. So it's basically like you do this, and you basically are your best self. And like switching that on and off is something extremely powerful.
Yeah, when you spoke of emotional, what was the word you used? Emotional triggers?
Trigger, yeah.
Triggers. Okay. Yeah, I in poker, like there for me, like my personal experience, emotionally, it's so easily be triggered at the table. I think people sometimes overlook it too, because like just like for me personally, just thinking about some would be like playing like trying to force things on the table, like you get when you're like feeling rushed, and then you get triggered by like little things, like maybe the dealer is like taking too long. Like personally for me, that's happened to me. Like I find myself like frustrated at like maybe I'm losing and like the dealer's like shuffling too slow or a player's taking too long, and it's like starting to affect my mental game. It's like starting to show, like I'm playing more frustrated, I'm forcing things, I'm rushing it, or maybe like even something as simple as like a player beats you and that triggers you, and so now you're like playing differently because you're trying to go after this player, which makes no sense because like strategically that's like not gonna like do well, right? If you're like changing your strategy to like try to beat another player because mentally like you're annoyed by that, right? Like even that to me is like a really big and common mistake that happens a lot to like most of us, at some point, right? And then another one I think would be like just like overall distractions, being distracted at the table. Everybody knows that live poker especially can be like really slow at times, and so just like how to improve like concentration, right? And how to improve your focus at the table. Is that also something that you can help players on?
Of course, yeah. Focus is also something that I hear a lot. Like, how can I improve my focus? And yeah, as you said correctly, especially as an MTT player, just imagine how crucial that is. If you say like the longer the session goes, the weaker my focus becomes.
Yeah. Yes.
But as an MTT player, you want to be highly focused at the end of your session.
Yes.
So yeah, very, very good point. I think if you work on your focus, especially as an MTT player, that can also do wonders.
Man, speaking of like MTTs, it's crazy because like even just one mistake in one crucial pot where you lost focus, or you're or even like one of the mistakes I mentioned earlier about like going after a player, or taking it personally or rushing it in one spot may screw up you might be out of the tournament, right? And so that shows how important it is to like always be at the top mentally, in all these big spots in the tournament where every situation counts, every hand counts,
Yeah, exactly.
Now that we've talked about some of the areas you can help poker players improve on, can we talk a little bit about some of the methods that you use? Like what's like kind of the process, the general process? I know it's different for every player. It obviously depends on what they need improvement on, but like what's like a general process that you use?
I think I have a very unique progress. So what I do with my clients is I work with them for 10 weeks. We know from different studies that if you do something for 66 days or longer, you will build new neural pathways. So you will build new thinking patterns, you will build new habits, and you can make a transformation. And this is what I focus on. So I'm focusing on a transformation rather than just giving away like, try this, good luck, see you next week, right?
Right.
And I'm basically taking those clients by the hand, and I'm basically supporting them over 10 weeks. We focus on an end result. So I offer free calls, and in that call we talk about, okay, what do you want to work on? What do you want to improve? And we basically work on this over the 10 weeks. Mainly I focus on 3 things. The first one is mindset. mindset improvement. So this would be everything regarding, for example, downswing, tilt, goal setting, whatever the client needs. The second one is about performance. That's usually something I like to start with. As I said, the emotional trigger, you do this and you're basically in a high performing state. Yeah. The last area is optimization. This would be the life around poker. So this would be things like sports, nutrition, exercise, but also relationships. And I think we need all three of them to a certain extent to make the transformation. And this is what I focus on.
I see. Yeah, that's great that like you have a structured plan for the player, and that way he or she will not feel like they need to figure out that on their own. I think it's like intimidating for some players to like know they want to improve, but then they don't even know where to start. Because I know at least for me, like I probably would have benefited in all the years that I played from some mindset coaching, even just like a life coach. Maybe if like they didn't even know poker, but just somebody to kind of like you said, like create a process, create a plan. For me, all I did back then was just write everything down. Like I just wrote down all my thoughts after a session. I wrote down my hands. I wrote down what I was thinking. And I tried to like my best to just go through all my journals and like trying to figure out a plan on like my next plan of attack next game. And sometimes that wouldn't be the best way, because like either I would forget or like, like I said, like you mentioned, it takes a while for your brain to kind of form habits, right? Good habits or bad habits. And sometimes it takes more than just that, I mean, I think it obviously helps to put your thoughts on paper and to put your goals and things like that. But I think having someone else like a coach that actually keeps you on track, right, of your progress is definitely going to be beneficial and maybe more efficient for a lot of people, a lot of players.
And accountability is a huge thing. Yeah, accountability is a huge thing because like this is why I'm not such a big fan of like video courses or something.
Okay.
Because a lot of times you start to watch a video course, right? And then you like after the second video you're like but if you have someone that holds you accountable, someone that can push you, someone you can talk to and exchange ideas with, or ask questions, that I think is extremely powerful.
For sure. No, definitely agree there. Definitely. And by the way, like are there any of famous poker players that you've helped that you want to mention? Are there like what are some of the poker players?
There are some, but of course a lot of high stakes poker players, they also want to keep this a secret. I have a YouTube channel with testimonials. If you want, you can link it down below, and I have some testimonials from the people that want to share it. It's on the YouTube channel, and I'm sure people know some faces there.
For sure. So you guys can check that out on his YouTube, and then we're also going to be featuring Karim's content at our website stackspoker.co. And for those that English is not your first language, don't worry, because we're going to be translating most of his content into Chinese as well on the site. So you'll be able to understand the content he'll be putting there. Now that we've had a little bit of introduction about Karim and how he became a mental game coach, I'm gonna ask Karim a few questions that I've seen poker players ask the most. The first question that I see players ask me is a ton is how can players overcome getting frustrated and from losing and tilting at tables? I think tilt is like probably one of the number one reasons why good players lose unnecessarily, right? Like for me personally, it's killed some of the biggest losses I've had in a poker session has come because of tilt and frustration, right? And how do players overcome that?
So I think when it comes down to frustration, we always want to be aware where this comes from. So if you go to a therapist, for example, we want to figure out, or the therapist wants to figure out, where are the triggers, or where is this coming from? So the first thing to solve any issue that you deal with is always awareness. So we start with awareness, and if you know where this is coming from, we also have the cure for it. And this is the beauty of it. So if you go to a rehab or to a therapist, they always train you to figure out where the issue is coming from. And if you say, oh, I'm frustrated when I have a bad beat or when I make a mistake, interesting. And then we can find a good solution for it. I think there's no general answer to this. It really comes down to what are the triggers and what can you do to fight that if you already know what triggers you.
I have like kind of my own personal question regarding this topic. Like I know we talked about earlier about this, we talked about tilt already, and I think a lot of players are able to stay calm and it's like we mentioned, it's easier to stay calm in the beginning and maybe during the beginning of the session, but as time goes by, that gets harder and harder, right? It's more challenging to maintain that frame of mind throughout maybe an 8-hour session. Like do you have any advice for like players that to be able to maintain that kind of like positive mindset over maybe a longer period of time, or like maybe just like they're on a downswing and they've been losing maybe the past few sessions? Like how do you like preserve that and able to maintain that positivity?
You mean within a long session?
Yeah,
right?
Either within a long session or during a long stretch of time. Like let's say like the last 3 weeks, I've played like maybe 4 or 5 sessions and I've lost like every single one. Like I said, it's easy for players to be positive when they're winning, right? And they're on an upswing, or like maybe in the beginning of the session when they're fresh. But how do players maintain, not getting frustrated over like losing, when they've been just like losing?
Yeah. So basically, I think what we need to understand, this can go very deep here. I try to keep it simple and easy. But what we want to understand is that you as a poker player, you're not just a poker player, you're more. Yeah. And this is a trap that a lot of people fall into, because they're like, poker is bad, and then they think my life is bad as well.
Right.
And of course, it can be frustrating if you're in a downswing or if you lose for 3 weeks in a row. But this is why you want to have balance in your life. There should be other things that give you some positivity and good emotions, like having a girlfriend or doing sports or stuff like that. And on top of that, we also want to focus on what we can control. Because a lot of times when there's a fear coming up or frustration coming up, a lot of times we focus on things we either cannot control, or we know deep down inside that the things we can control, we don't put enough effort in. If we are able to let go of the things we can control, like variance, for example, or bad beat, that gives us already a nice feeling. That's already like halfway of the solution, because we're like, okay, if someone basically hits his card on the river, nothing I can control. Yeah, maybe I can find the fold, maybe not. But I'm basically having a better feeling. And on top of that, if you say, okay, what can I control? I can maybe study more, put in more effort, be better prepared for my sessions, take more time for my decisions. These are things that I can control, and I want to focus on them and put more attention on them.
I like that. I think that answers that question pretty well about how do players overcome getting frustrated, right? Is redirecting your focus on what you can control. So remove the frustration from the things you cannot control, like you said, the bad runouts or things like that. For the second question, I get asked often is like, how do players improve their concentration on the table? Like it's kind of leading from the first question we asked, but it's like a spin-off, like not just like concentration, but like how do they build mental endurance and not get bored or distracted when they're playing, right? Because obviously, some sessions are very long and people get burnt out, they get distracted, they're on their phones. Like information is so important in poker, right? Like whether we talk about like MTTs or like in cash games, like every detail that you might miss might cost you a big pot later, right? And so how do players prevent that and stay mentally sharp at the tables?
The classic solution for this, or one part of the solution, is meditation. I think if you really want to make it to a high level of poker, meditation can help you with concentration, but also with so many other things. So that is definitely one thing that I highly recommend everyone.
Okay.
And then one tool that we know from sports psychology is that we want to do the opposite that we see in our sport. So in easy words, if you sit a lot in poker, what you do, obviously, you want to spend your breaks actively. So if you have a 5-minute break, you want to stand, you want to stretch, you want to, keep your body active. So that way, it's first of all resetting your emotions. So you probably tilt less. And second of all, you get the blood pumping, and you basically refresh your mind. And you said one thing I liked a lot, which is also avoiding your phone. So what we know, just imagine the brain is like a rubber band. And in my hand, there's a rubber band. And during the session, let's say you're an MTT player for 55 minutes, you stretch that band because you have to be focused, you have to concentrate, you have to make decisions.
Right.
So in your break, you ideally bring that rubber band together because in the next half of the session, you want to stretch it again and then break and then stretch. And that rubber band at some point might break. So we either improve the rubber band so we can stretch it more,
right?
Or option number 2, we improve the brakes so the rubber band gets basically together faster in the break.
Interesting. I never heard of that before. So I've seen people do things physically, at the table, and maybe that's for those reasons that you mentioned, is to create those breaks and physically, doing something and like resetting, like you said, Yeah, I think that's it's so much easier said than done. For me, like I've so many times where like people have told me that to to get up and to stretch, to do something, right? Like let's say like you've been lost a few hands and you're feeling the frustration coming up, and sometimes all it takes is just like physically getting up, right? It's just as easy as that, but players can't do it sometimes,
Taking a few steps away from the table is always a good idea. Yeah, but there are many ways to do it, and I also think that different solutions work better for some people or for others.
That actually kind of goes to the next question. Are there other practical things like mental exercises or like hacks that people can do quickly at the tables that are easy to do? Obviously we mentioned getting up and the band that you talked about. But are there like any other things that you can mention for players?
I will not give away all the solutions, but I give you two. I give you two very powerful ones. The first one is something that I see a lot of times happening, but people are not aware of it.
Okay.
So if you say you get frustrated, a lot of times our body's getting tense. Because we're like, we have like maybe a little bit of anger inside of us, or maybe fear or frustration or any kind of emotion. Yes. And then we know that our body's getting tense. And one thing we learned from meditation is that your breathing most likely will change. So one of the things that you can just switch your attention to is your breathing.
Okay.
And if you go from your normal breathing to like I'm overdoing it right now, but if you feel like your breathing is getting more tense or different, if you calm down and if you breathe like in the beginning of the session, for example, you will see that your body relaxes. And usually if your body is relaxed, you can let go of frustration.
Definitely, I hear this all the time, stressing the importance of how the mental and the physical is connected so closely, more than most people even know, right? Like you said, just something as simple as just your breathing can control your entire mental state in a moment, right? And I think that's something that people sometimes overlook, and definitely can benefit from those exercises for sure. Okay.
I give you a second one as well. I call this the attention card.
Okay.
So a lot of people that have a lack in self-awareness or want to train the self-awareness, I always ask them, what is your favorite poker card?
Okay.
And for example, they say the King of Hearts. That's my favorite poker card. King of Hearts. And I say, okay, every time you see the King of Hearts, I want you to focus on yourself. I want you to like just check in with yourself. Like, what do you think? How do you feel? How is everything going? Is everything fine? Do you need a break? Do you need to step away from the table? How is your breathing? Ask yourself a few questions. And the King of Hearts could be seen like on the board or in your own hand or in the showdown. So every time you see that card, just put your attention to yourself and ask yourself a few questions. And this is training your self-awareness in a lot of cases. And if you do that, you will figure out when you need a break, and you can prevent like frustration or tilt a lot of times before it even happens.
I like that. Mine's the Ace of Spades, so I'm going to try that next time.
Awesome.
Okay, so next question. How can players overcome nervousness or fear of losing, and just getting out of that mindset that like they're going to be unlucky and they're going to lose? Like how do you regain getting back into the positive mental space when you're in that negative mindset, because it happens to me a lot where like I feel like sometimes things have not been going well, and like maybe I just feel like I'm gonna lose. I'm just in a negative mindset. I'm like spiraling down with this like self-destructive mindset. And I'm a big believer in like law of attraction. And usually if I start thinking that way, like that's how things go. My session just gets worse. I keep losing. I blame myself, and it just so how do players overcome that nervousness and that negativity, the fear?
First of all, like always, we want to figure out why are we even nervous. Yeah. And for example, if it's your first live MTT tournament, I remember my first live tournament. Yeah, I was shaking. I was like, oh, what is going on? Yeah, how good are my opponents? But if, for example, if you say, yeah, you enter the session already in a negative mindset, or you have the feeling that you will lose today, then it's all about preparing yourself for the session in a proper way. Yeah, this is what I said with the emotional triggers before. If you remember, if you can like reset your mind like this, you will have a much better feeling. And I also think that a lot of times we feel like losing, but if you can remind yourself of like, okay, I'm in a negative mindset right now, but this is part of life. Because a lot of times we wake up in the morning and we're like, this will be a bad day. But I always say like the bad days give us a chance to grow. So if you say, okay, I'm in a negative mind state, but I know that I have enough ability, enough skill to turn this around. Right. And I will prove it to myself that I can do it.
Right.
And a lot of times, even if this is just a slightly winning session, if you just want a little bit of money, you will feel twice as good because you know that you entered a session with a bad mindset, you pushed yourself, and you just made a little bit of profit. But this feels like a huge win because you're not just beaten the others, in terms of poker, but you've beaten yourself.
I like that. The last part especially, I've tried to incorporate into my mental game recently is what you said about just like beating yourself. Instead of like focusing so much on like winning the money, and obviously that's important to a lot of players, and it hurts to lose. But I try to redirect my focus on playing in a way that I'm going to be happy about at the end of the day. After the session, if I look back, I'm going to be like, am I okay with the way I played today? There are certain spots where like I could have done better. How was I mentally throughout the game? Throughout the whole session? Like, was there spots where I was probably frustrated and made a bad decision? Like, can I own up to that? Or am I going to blame, something else? And so I've tried to adjust and adapt, and I've tried to redirect the focus on like what you said is like, back to reach your own performance, and how you can improve. And I found that really helps, because on days where like maybe, my opponents did get lucky, but again, going back and focusing on like, okay, what could I have changed, right? Throughout that 8-hour session where I got unlucky. Maybe there's little things that I could have done where I could have lost less, and definitely helps.
This is also what we see in the UFC, right? A lot of times, the athletes that have a very strong mindset, they said, if you're in that cage, you fight against yourself. And I really like that, because I think he's right. Your opponent most likely has, a very similar age, as I said before, same height, same weight. So it's basically you against yourself.
Right. Interesting way to put it. I never thought about that way, but you're right. Yeah, that's why they put the same people about the same, like you said, the same weight, about the same skill level, right? Okay, so next question, a little bit related, similar. How do players overcome like feeling depressed and sadness from taking some big losses in poker? I think it's inevitable. I did a video about just downswings and how that's inevitable, and losing, right? All poker players lose, right? But it's normal. But like, how do players mentally kind of like grow from that and not get stuck in that mindset, and find the motivation to keep playing? I know a lot of times poker players, when they're going through a downswing, they start feeling hopeless and they feel like they can't win anymore. So how do players overcome that?
The first question is, what is it about the downswing or the losing streak that really bothers you? Is it the money, or is it losing itself? Because the solution is different for each point. If it's about like losing, that could be a whole nother topic, because we will need to figure out, okay, why is losing bother you? Maybe they have enough money on the side, but it's just like, I hate the feeling of losing and I don't like to get beaten up all the time. So we want to dig deeper on that and figure out, okay, where is this coming from? This could go all the way. I had one client who struggled with that, and we figured out that this is coming from his childhood. Because when he was like very young, he was playing against some friends or his parents, and they never let him win. And he felt like he needs to like step up, or like do something to win. And very interesting. So this can go extremely deep here. If it's about the money, then we need to talk about bankroll management maybe, or we have to talk about the financial situation. And then maybe it's a good idea to move down in stakes. And some people, they don't like to move in stakes because like, oh, I think I'm better than the stakes that I need to move down to. But then the question is that your ego speaking, or like, what is it, right? So you see, it could, a lot of times, there's so many things that are connected here, or that play a role. So just giving a general idea or a general solution is probably a little bit difficult, because, as I said, there's so many factors coming into play.
The last question is, what is the single most important mindset concept? After all this, we talked about all the common questions. What's the single most important concept, that you would give poker players?
I think if you look at my story a little bit, and if you guys are interested, there are certain videos on my YouTube channel where I talk about my background, my story in complete detail. But when I was young, I can tell you, I was super shy. I had absolutely no money, and I had no direction. I was basically lost. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go, and I was just like, life is happening to me. So I have no power to decide where my life is going. And when I first figured out or found personal development or mindset work, I realized that if you put in the effort, you will get usually rewarded. So the more you put in, the more you will get out in most cases. So this is something we call growth mindset. So if you have that growth mindset, and you know that you can change, you know that you can improve. And if you also know that everything is possible in life. I remember, like, as I said before, like when I was younger, I had like no clue like where my life is going. And I thought I'm basically like, will end up not being happy and have like a average life where I just regret certain things, most likely. And this is what I was like imagining my future. But when I first figured out that everything is possible, that gave me such a good feeling. And I knew that if I really put in the effort, I will get rewarded. And a lot of times people ask me like, Karim, do you think it's still possible to become a professional poker player? And the answer is, of course it is. Of course.
That'd be hard, a lot
Everything
harder,
is possible.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but I think it's possible. And I think everything is possible. You can also become an astronaut, right? If you want. Everything is possible. And it's only about how much effort you put into something. Same goes with, like, a lot of times people ask me, how much mindset work do I have to do until I see results? Or how much meditation do I have to do until I see results? It's always the same answer. The more you put in, the more you will get out. And I think this is one of the biggest concepts that I found for myself in mindset.
I like that. I think you also mentioned something earlier that really struck a chord, and I want to remind everybody, is that, like, you mentioned how, your results don't define you, right? Like you may be losing money, or you may have a bad run of cards, but that does not make you a bad person or a failure, right? Is to not let failures define you. And especially not let one poker session define you as a poker player, right? And there's always a chance to improve your situation, to improve your mental game. And every session is kind of like another opportunity to do that, right? To learn improvements and to implement them into the next game. And poker's like we said, it's a self journey, and getting over the judgment and of other players, how they view you, I think is important, and just focus on improving yourself is really key. Yeah, that's all the questions that we have. If for players that would like to understand in more detail, this is just really the surface. Just kind of went over a few questions that I get asked a lot, and so we got Karim's opinion on these questions. But like I said, this is just a brief introduction for those that would like to consult him and learn more about the mental game. Feel free to check out the website stackspoker.co. We're going to have a lot of his content there. A lot of it will be also translated in Chinese with subtitles. If English is not your first language, you might find those beneficial wherever you are in poker. And yeah, is there anything else you want to add at the end?
No, I can just say thank you for having me.
Okay.
And it was a pleasure to talk to you. And I'm looking forward to share some of my knowledge.